Laurence Waddell was a Scottish explorer, professor of Tibetan, amateur archaeologist, Assyriologist. He had great research and findings in theology. Here I will summarize his view with my notes. Waddell believed that one biblical figure in particular had a far-reaching effect on civilizations all over the world, the vilified figure of Cain. According to the Bible, he was Adam's firstborn son, and was said to have gone bad when he murdered his brother, Abel. But instead of being executed for his sin, he was exiled to the land of Nod. Waddell identifies the first Sumerian king, Ukusi, with Adam, and the second Sumerian king, Chin, with Cain. Chin was said by the Sumerians to have built the cities of Erech, Lagash, Agad, and Babylon. He is also said to have taught the Sumerians agriculture, especially the growing of grain, and the brewing of alcohol. Cain's name actually means grain in Hebrew, and the book of Genesis tells us that the source of Cain's jealousy of Abel was that God had accepted Abel's fleshy sacrifices, and rejected Cain's sacrifices of fruits and grain. Waddell also identifies Cain with another biblical figure, Nimrod. Waddell says that one of Cain's titles was Lord of the Tree of Life, which, in Sumerian, Babylonian language, was written as Nimrod, or sometimes Maru or Mao. This may link up with the word for sea, Mer, and the word for Atlantis, Meru, discussed earlier. Nimrod's wife, Queen Semiramis, was associated with fish symbolism, as well as with doves, and was labeled the Queen of Heaven. Thus Semiramis seems to have contributed a lot to the image of the goddess Ishtar Isis Astarte, as well as the idolatry of the Virgin Mary. The Sumerian king Chin was succeeded by his son, Enu, whom Waddell identifies with Enoch. There are two Enochs in Genesis, and one is the son Cain supposedly had after his expulsion from Eden. In Genesis 4:17 it states, "And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived, and bare Enoch, and he builded a city, and called the name of the city, after the name of his son, Enoch." Waddell believed that both Enochs in Genesis were in fact the same person, and that Enoch is also the same figure personified as the biblical Noah, that is, that it was he who piloted the ark during the flood. Waddell stated that Enoch is regarded by biblical authorities as being identical with Noah of the flood myth. Waddell demonstrated that the names of both Enoch and Noah have both been written as Noch, and also as Hanuk, in ancient texts. Cain's descendants are Enoch, Erid, Mahujael, Methuselah, Lamech. Seth's descendants are Enos, Canaan, Mahalaleel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech. Clearly, the descendants of Seth are just a muddled version of the descendants of Cain. This leads one to believe that Enoch's genealogy was altered to conceal his descent from Cain. The name Canaan has been added in as a hint of this, and two of Enoch's descendants, Mahujael and Erid, are listed as his ancestors instead. So generations between Enoch and Noah could also be fabricated. Eden and Atlantis are purportedly the same. That must mean that Eden's rightful rulers were at one time overtaken and expelled, just as the Titans were by Zeus. Zeus is likened to the Sumerian Enlil, or the biblical Jehovah, the Jove of the Romans. Adam and Eve's expulsion would most likely symbolize this, and the deluge which followed would be the same as the sinking of Atlantis. We know that Cain's parents were expelled from Eden Atlantis, and settled elsewhere. And we know that Cain was later exiled from that place too, purportedly for killing his brother Abel, whom Waddell believes is actually the ancient god King Baal, a son of Enlil, Jehovah. He then traveled around the world, building cities and spreading civilization to primitive people. Enoch did likewise, following in his father's footsteps, and the cities they built, as well as accounts of the deeds from the people whose lives they touched, can be found in countries and cultures the world over. But as for the biblical record, none of this is reported beyond the exile of Cain, and the building of one city named after his son Enoch. Cain's life and descendants are almost entirely omitted from the rest of the biblical narrative, and the grandest thing Enoch is said to have done was to walk with God. For this, he was rewarded by being taken to paradise while still alive, something that does not happen to many other men in the Bible. But note how the description of the event is phrased in Genesis 5:24, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." If by God they mean Jehovah Enlil Zeus, who took over Eden Atlantis unlawfully, and who was the enemy of Enoch's father, Cain, then he was not taken to heaven as a reward for his good behavior. Probably Enoch was kidnapped and forced into going back to Atlantis. Perhaps he had inscribed his wisdom onto tablets which were meant to survive a deluge which he foresaw. On these tablets could have been written the true history of what had happened in Atlantis. What Templars or other occultist, alchemist, King Solomon found was somehow these documents.